And 3, 2. Hey guys, this is Joyce
and Blake.
You should have seen the stare she gave me.
Oh my gosh, I was like, my microphone is way taller than me.
And welcome to
Savagely Scaled.
All right, this is an interesting episode for y'all. It was a very good one for me to research because I knew absolutely nothing about the topic we're about to talk about. But in this episode, we will be talking about the Professional Fitness Athletes Association, or the PFAA. Now, if you haven't heard much about this, I haven't either, nor has Blake, so we're very fascinated to introduce this to you. But just in a little blip to get into what that is, this organization was created in hopes of representing competitive athletes and their interests when it comes to competition and in the sport of CrossFit. It is an organization dedicated to the safety, the fairness, and also just the season planning for the games. It has recently been a hot topic of discussion, actually, in the CrossFit community as a result of the recent incidents that happened. But also PFAA President Brent Fikowski had a very fascinating Instagram post regarding the PFAA and also regarding the death of Lazar Dukic, which I think is a very great representation of the PFAA.
Yeah.
So we'll get into it a little bit more in the next few minutes. So let's jump on in.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right. So the word of the day is Metcon. It is a short for metabolic conditioning, combines strength movements and skill movements for a time and designed to evaluate your heart rate rapidly. So we actually do a lot of Metcons. We do AMRAPs that are with Metcons because they're short spurts. And then EMOM. So all these things, because you're like, wait a minute, you just said AMRAP, and we went over that. We've done EMOM. Metcon is these short spurts. So the other day we did a 10-minute Metcon, and it was an AMRAP for that 10 minutes.
So it's pretty much, I guess, exercises that involve very elevated heart rate. I guess. Right.
So, like, it's the ones that I really like. They're, like, short spurts. So, the Metcon that we did the other day was an AMRAP for 10 minutes. It was 10 deadlifts. We had males at 225, women at 155, 10 box jumps at 24 and 20 with a step down. Because remember, we're practicing that step down. So, we're not really affecting that Achilles that we don't want to tear or injured. And then a run for 200 meters. Right? Okay. And that frame was trying to get between 3 and 5 rounds, depending on what we did. We were holding on for, our deadlifts. We're moving for our box jumps, and we're kind of, relaxing on that run, which is hilarious because 430 looks at me when I say, hey, the burpees, hey, the run, hey, this is where you're supposed to be
careful.
Kind of, not relaxing. What's the word I'm looking for?
Bracing?
Recovering.
Oh, I'm like bracing.
Yeah, I use bracing a lot too. Or stabilize.
Right.
Or hug your spine.
I'm doing it now.
It's where you're recovering, and they all look at me like, really? That's where you're recovering? And I'm like, it's a good pace.
It's where you catch your breath.
Sprinting. And half of them look at me like how I would look at my coach and be like, that's not where I breathe.
You're like, this isn't breathing.
No. During my run, even when I'm not sprinting.
Oh, man. Exciting things in the land of cardio.
Yeah, but those are I like 10 minutes and below workouts. And even with a good weight and a movement, I also love just 2 movements continually going, and they're like, hey, you gotta get 10 rounds in these 10 minutes, and I'm like, okay, if it's movements that I've got, let's do the best I can.
Lame. I like workouts that are longer. I'm more of an endurance.
You really, really like those, and I'm like, I like them when we partner them.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I'm with somebody else in that hardship.
Yeah. You're in the struggle together. It doesn't feel as much. No, that's a good point.
But let's get into the
PFAA.
Yes. Again, like Joyce said, I had no idea until all of this stuff came out.
All the drama. Yeah.
There's so many things since this that I feel like I have been so naive and just thinking about CrossFit as my own little snow globe. And it's so much
vast.
bigger than that. And I know we talk about the community and how big the community is, but we also are all in our little tiny community that we make in our own gyms.
Yeah.
So it was very eye-opening. And I feel like how CrossFit is growing, like new members, like knowing this stuff also is very cool because it's athlete run.
Yes, it is.
So it's
Athlete
not like
run,
a
athlete
big,
led.
not a big monopolizing company.
100%.
It was formed in 2020, and this was due to, like, of course, the COVID. And what are we trying to do to better our community or
The safety of the athletes.
our safety? I feel like COVID really, for some organizations, like helped with like breaking things down because you had to be so eye-opening. You couldn't.
We had to adapt.
Yeah. And so it was
scary.
during that. It's a Washington-based nonprofit to serve the needs of competitive fitness athletes in their community. So again, I just like, for some reason, I thought CrossFit had their own little board for this.
Right.
Because to me, why wouldn't you?
Right,
So
100%.
to have like a athlete led, and I can see like, oh, if it's only athlete led, would CrossFit just put like a head on it, you know, somebody who's in business or somebody who's more of like that, and make it like members have a due for it,
Right.
or athletes who want to be a part of it have a due, and they would have to be like the competing So there was a lot of like, after I thought about that, I was like, yeah, you might want to make your own little organization that just doesn't have that umbrella about CrossFit on it. The membership for the PFAA included 60 athletes in 2020, and now it is 80, representing the masters, teams, and national championships in CrossFit around the world. I do like how they have, like we said, athletes, but we also have coaches. We also have some people some experts that have been in the CrossFit community, the CrossFit headquarters, helped at games, helped at Wadapalooza, or were some big hitters at those things. I feel like you need all of those pieces of the puzzle to connect, to outreach to this big, huge picture of what CrossFit is and what CrossFit can do. And who better than the people who are coaching or
competing.
and competing, and the big programmers, and really talking it out, but being led by the athletes, being like, okay, yes, we do have these coaches, we do have the programming, we do have medical team, but it's like, I'm doing it. So you guys can only say so much and can't cross that line.
Right.
You know, I'm the one on that floor when it says 3, 2, 1, go, and I can see and I can feel what's happening.
100%.
So it is nice, but there is the athlete board. So who's on the athlete board?
Yeah, let's jump into it. So when looking at the specific individuals that are participating in the PFAA, mind you, like Blake said, these people were elected by their peers. So CrossFit athletes themselves decided that these are the people we want to represent us when it comes to this board. And at the top, the president of the board, we have Brent Fikowski, who many of you know as being one of the top athletes in CrossFit. We also have Dina Swift, who is representing the Asia and Africa space. And then we have, and pardon me if I do not get these names correctly, Laverne Engelbrecht, who's also representing Asia and Africa. And then we had Lazar Dukic and Luka Dukic, both representing Europe. We had Fikowski and representing North America East. And then Blake's fave, Pat Vellner, representing North America West.
And I just like my biggest smile.
And I love it because it's like the people we like, you know, and it makes sense.
There's
because
a reason why I like them.
There's a reason, and here it is, right? And then we have Royce Dunn and Victoria Campos lastly. Royce Dunn represents Oceania and Victoria Campos South America. And then we also have, like Blake mentioned, the Advisory Council, which is comprised more of coaches, agents, medical professionals, and brands that are all representing pretty much the CrossFit community and experience. So they are individuals that this board leans on for the implementation of key decisions when it comes to athlete safety. So they did their homework. They reached out to people who are not only coaches, owners of gyms, people who are medical advisors, people who, have founded training programs, people who are designated and professionals in this space. And I appreciate how they did that. We have people such as Caroline Lambre, who is an L4 coach and owner of CrossFit Wonderland.
Oh, and who is she connected to?
Yeah, we know. Whatever. But she's someone's wife, right? What, right?
So, significant other? Because I don't know if they got married or not.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, but I mean, at this point, I kind of consider them married because he's off limits.
Yeah.
So
Jeff Adler.
Yeah,
that's who we're talking about.
And we have John Singleton, who is the founder of the program. And then we also have Justin Collier, founder of Underdog Athletics. And then we have Max, Hogg, I believe, founder of Training Think Tank. And lastly, Joshua Hicks, who's a medical advisor for the board.
You do have executive team
too.
That's
right.
Who is Mitchell Bragg and Grace Paulus.
But all of these people represent the PFAA. Not to mention the PFAA also has partnerships with brands, right? And part of those brands are Tier, of course. Yeah. And then, as Blake mentioned, they do play an active role in Wadapalooza and representing the safety there for that event. But yeah, overall, a lot of amazing people involved, a lot of amazing professionals that make up the PFAA. And then when looking further into like, what is the PFAA about? What are their goals? What is the aim here? As Blake mentioned, this organization was created as a way for athletes to collectively organize outside of the CrossFit HQ brand and to pretty much put on a unified front for their voices and their interests. At the end of the day, I think the ultimate goal for the PFAA is to make sure that the athlete's health and safety is prioritized and also to provide guidelines for fair and equitable competition across CrossFit competitions. And then they also kind of work specifically with athletes to optimize their earnings, develop amazing opportunities for them outside of the games to make sure that athletes are taken care of even after they're done competing. So growing awareness of functional fitness, the community in functional fitness, and also elevating professional athlete visibility. So how do we give these athletes more voice? How do we make sure that they're taken care of even after they compete in the games? And also, how do we make sure that their interests are visible across any CrossFit event?
Yeah, because I think they want to ultimately just improve that communication. I feel like in life, we're always trying to communicate in a partnership with anybody, whether it's our significant other, with our kids, at times with my animals. But with things like this, like a big, huge thing is creating that openness and not having athletes feel like they're being just, I think
number.
Yeah, Pat Vellner said really mindfully, which opened my eyes, how they would just pat you on the head and be like, nope, you got this. Like, it's more of like, hey, I'm an adult, you're an adult, and these are my
let's do this right.
Yeah, my questions and stuff like that. And even with they're looking at outside companies as well and individuals outside of this organization to give input to shape the competition, like how you were saying. Like, it's not just them saying, no, we have the right thing. They're trying to do their homework and be like, oh, well, what about this? What about that? Okay, that doesn't work. What about this? Like, trying to grow that safety and that awareness and having that open communication. And again, like the athletes, like even with optimizing like the payout, because I know for the Oceania, like a couple of years ago, like there was athletes who won the year prior that still didn't get their check.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they were like planning on not doing it again because they're like, well, we still haven't gotten a payout from it. So why would you? Yes, why would you? Yeah. If that is your livelihood, why would you do it again if people haven't gotten their payout?
And I think that's the vibe that's starting to pretty much transcend through the community, is that a lot of athletes are feeling that way. Like, why even be a part of CrossFit HQ if they're failing us in so many areas? And I think the PFAA is trying to pretty much go against that. They're trying to like work with CrossFit HQ, and we'll go into more detail about that. But I mean, it's been emphasized on their website, like, hey, we're writing it out like you've asked us. We're doing all of it to standard like you need us to do. We're even taking it a step ahead and doing your job and, doing all of these things so that you guys, to make it easier for you guys. And CrossFit HQ has time and time again, and again, we'll go into more detail, but, has failed a lot of these athletes, and the athletes are really feeling it. And again, PFAA is trying to change that. And if you go on their website, you'll see that they have a wide range of resources and education that's really geared towards CrossFit Games competitors, which I thought was really neat.
It was because like I know like with newer CrossFit people coming in or new members and they're like, oh, we just don't even know if CrossFit's for us, and we're kind of going above with information right now about people's heads if you're newer. But just reading some of the articles, it was like very, again, mind-opening, which is going to be the vocabulary word for or saying for this episode, of what's going on or what their views are. Or I just love reading articles or listening to podcasts about what I'm interested in. So again, finding that and not finding where it's I don't want to, some articles remind me of when you watch on the movie and they're like, oh, I got the transcripts and half of the things are blacked out.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, I just heard that from so-and-so, but this article says the exact same thing, or that Instagram story says the exact same thing. And it's like, it feels like very bits and pieces. Right. To where I think this is a little bit more open for everybody.
And I think that's a good way of putting it. It's like, it seems like the PFAA website is just very transparent, I guess would be the word. Like, they just put everything out there in the sense of like, hey, here is the guidebook that they give us for the CrossFit Games. Here is the CrossFit Games handbook for Wodapalooza. Here's the rule book for what to expect and drug testing and, dietary supplements and all of these athlete educational factors that honestly, I didn't even think athletes had to look through, but also it's a way of, like you said, creating transparency, letting the people know, like, hey, this is what they give us, so you guys can also have access to all of that. And you guys can see how the CrossFit Games manages all of this. Like, here it is.
It answers questions. Like, if you're... Because, you guys, like, when you watch something and you just, in your own mindset, is like, what about this answer? What about this answer? Why wasn't this taken care of? Why wasn't that? And if you can find it, because there's sometimes, like... when we research things or we just like pause the episode to look it up and it's like you can't find any of the information. It's very like nonchalant information for everybody. And with this, like having the rule books of stuff, like even when we go and we judge competitions or for the open and we have our own rule books or rules that we have to make sure that we're telling the athlete before they perform.
Got it down the wrong pipe, and I was like trying to hold it so long, and I was like, I can't.
So, like Joyce said, like how they have like the 7 things to know as a game rookie, the dietary supplements and safety. Like we read that a lot. Like most of the things that I read at articles is the 7 movements to help you get abs or things like that. And it's like,
what to eat to get a flat belly.
Yeah. What protein is good protein. And it's like, if you're also telling me like these supplements are good because you also get those clickbait of the 5 best supplements. It's like, well, what is the safety with the supplements compared to, oh, well, that athlete's taking them and look at their body. And we don't realize that person has also put how many years into building their body. And if they're having that article with like the safetyness of it and just going into the athlete education part, I feel like even us normal people reading it is also very beneficial.
100%. And I think another thing that the PFAA tries to do is, like you've mentioned, trying to promote inclusivity, make sure that every athlete is being represented when it comes to the work that they do. And the way that they do this is by conducting pretty much surveys throughout the year, mostly after events, and in particular after every CrossFit Games. And they do this to better understand the athlete experience, but also to help the organization focus on the needs of its athletes. So, for example, the 2023 Games from last year came with requests that the PFAA made to CrossFit HQ on items such as equipment height and how to practice equity in that space, coach access, weather, lake water testing, and also talking about heat. So they do their due diligence to make sure that, hey, let's look at all factors. Let's reach out to CrossFit HQ. How can we work together to make sure that our athletes are educated? And then we're going to jump into more detail now, but most responses from HQ are quote unquote, we will continue to make every effort. We will try, we will XYZ. And most recent requests from the PFAA revolve around, providing more clarity pertaining to, how long are these events going to be taking outdoors? Like, what's the heat going to look like? How can we prepare? And how can we ensure that maybe athletes who are in other countries who don't know what the weather in Texas or any of these states are going to look like, how can we make sure that they're going to be taken care of? And the great thing, again, as we've spoken before, is that the PFAA has a lot of resources and information that reference the timeline of recent proposals that they've made to HQ. It also references a lot of like enhancements or requests that they've made as well. So it was, as Blake said, very eye-opening to see how involved this group has been for so many years and how little it has like made such a huge impact, at least for me, because I had no idea they existed. And I was like, these people need more of a platform to be known and recognized, because I did not even know that they've been working this hard with HQ to try to implement change. Like, that's sad.
Yeah, because I was even like reading when they sent an 11-page document that was just covering suggestions and regulations for requirements around clothing and shoes. So these are like types. What is the supportive equipment that include knee sleeves, belts, and additional attire such as swimwear, adhesive materials, and electronic wearables? Because I think the biggest thing that I've been seeing the past couple of weeks is how some of these wearables, like the chip timers and everything that they had, or to measure the like athlete's heart rate and everything that's like metabolic with it. Some of them are not meant to be in water, and yet they're like, here, wear this. It'll be fine in water. And they went over and they're like, oh, it's not supposed to be in water for a certain amount of time. Oh, no. So like if the PFAA is like, hey, that one doesn't work, what about this one? And
again, they're doing their homework.
Yeah. It's just very astonishing that you have this platform and they're questioning something, like how we get like the response of like, hey, we'll look into this. Hey, we'll look into it. And it's like, okay, well, how long are you going to look into it?
It's been a few years.
Mm-hmm. But let's jump into like this media side of things. So the PFAA has remained very active in the media, holding a panel in Wadapalooza this year, speaking to the adjustments made to the competition due to the weather. Because they do have a big thing about how the water, how your body, how the weather is,
impacts
the humidity in places, the heat stream of places, the coldness, going from hot to cold, and what it does on the body. And the need for more discussion and power for collective ability. Brent Fikowski, the PFAA president and third fittest man on the earth, recently posted his Instagram post after the 2024 games, an incident involving his friend Lazar Dukic, pushing for improved safety policies during CrossFit events. What he stated was, "The weekend is over and I miss my friend Lazar. Since 2020, I've done what I can do to professionalize and improve the sport of CrossFit. With the support of others, we set up the PFAA and petitioned CrossFit on behalf of athletes to create a fairer playing field, standardize movements, and more than anything, promote athlete safety." So since 2020, he's been with them since the beginning and trying to get this.
Also, I love this post because in this post, he acknowledges everything he's done since then. And it's such a great, it painted a whole picture for me. I didn't have to read on PFA to know what's been happening.
With him and even with Pat voicing what he has said, it's very, that's when my, like, again, eye-opening, transparency, like, things that us average members look at or
we don't know
not
about.
Look at. Yeah, we don't see. We just see a person who's working out and doing what we think has all the safety guidelines and their best interests at heart.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, so going into it again, when we propose constructive feedback, the sentiment we're left with us is, don't worry, we got this. Just trust us. We have a better understanding of this than you do, which is so disheartening because an athlete is telling people who have not been, I don't want to say CrossFit athletes because they do CrossFit and you guys know that I believe that whoever walks into a CrossFit gym is a CrossFit athlete. But these are not the elite athletes who work out 3 times a day, who are watching their nutrition nonstop, who are making this their job. These are HQ people, representatives that are not doing the same thing as this person. And you're saying you are the same thing as me, as an average person. Remember, like with this podcast, we're not like, oh, the elites are the same as us. We do have similarities with things that help our body and recovery and stuff like that. But I would never go to, Daniel Brandon or Ariel Lohman and be like, oh, well, I did the workout. It was fine. I probably scaled it. I probably did it in an air conditioning building. I've done it to what works best for me. And when they do these competitions, it's not put in the best, best like environment at times. So for somebody to be like, oh, we know more than you do. Like, I cannot stand when people do that. I'm like, oh, you've done the same thing I just did. Got it. And with the same characteristics and with the same environment and with the same everything that I'm going through. You know exactly what I'm going. What experiment have you done? Are you the controlled group or the experimental group?
Yeah.
The problem is no one on their team has competed or coached in this sport at a high level, like we just reiterated. Also, they won't let athletes be involved in the process because everything they do has to be shrouded in mystery. Which I get. I think that's more towards us watching. Like, oh, what are they going to do? And when we hear that has happened and see the athletes' faces and stuff like that, it's, to me, and this, I've only seen things and they can be edited. It is that mystery of like, oh my gosh, they have to do that. But is there that point where they can raise their hand and question it and be like, hey, did you guys look into this? Because I don't think like that's safe. And if so, are they being met with the same thing of it'll be fine? I know we have demo groups,
right? And
the demo groups go through things and they test different types and stuff like that. But again, I feel like it's also very environmental. And was it exactly?
It's true.
Because sometimes with the demo group, when they demo the movement, it's just the movement. It's not them working out with the fatigue, with the high humidity, with the sun at its highest peak. And to my knowledge from years back, the demo group did it at Dave's gym. It wasn't in the actual facility, and it wasn't done during the same exact time. And if they do, again, they're just showing you what the movement standard is and what you need to do.
Jumping back into the quote.
So Pat, Tia, Cole, Fee, Annie, Lazar, Luca, Chandler, Laverne, Dina, Victoria, Royce, myself, and many other athletes, coaches, these past 4 years have been willing to volunteer our time with the PFAA to lend our experience to help the sport improve. And one by one, we've all lost interest because there has been no reciprocity.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, you good. She need me to take over, you let me know.
Well, else I know that CrossFit does not aim to hurt anybody when they say safety is our number one priority. I simply have not believed this to be true for a long time.
Ouch.
Right? I believe their top priority has always been their subjective definition of the test and the creative freedom they wish to exert when inventing these workouts. Athlete safety comes at best a paltry second.
I know, fancy words, Professor.
I was like,
Brent Fikowski, man.
And this past weekend, that strategy went terribly wrong with the most tragic of consequences. I never thought it would be something as bad as one of our friends drowning in a lake. I'll be honest. I was worried about avoiding many of the same safety issues we've tried to solve in the past. So what's very disheartening again is that they have been said so many times about these safety, and he's just voicing how he has these
What
things
he has heard and seen.
Yeah. So, like, let's look at some past things that he was talking about. So, there was a knee injury caused by doing a max back squat on a wet wooden platform. I believe that was Alex Carone.
Wow.
Then we have an injury from landing on a coiled climbing rope. That was Scott Panchek. And I remember when this happened because he even voiced this was when they started doing the same workouts for regionals. And everybody had to do it. And Scott, you could just see how mad he was because he brought it to headquarters or even brought it to the regionals' knowledge. Like, hey, like other regionals, you shouldn't be doing this. This is a hazard. And I feel like they were just like, no, that was a hazard for you. Basically, they didn't say that. It's just
just felt that way.
Yeah, it felt that way. And I wasn't there, but you could just see like they still did it for all the other regionals. And you could see when it was taped how many of them were tripping on it or getting their leg like coiled in it too. And I was like, he straight up told you. He straight up told you. And you guys wrecked his leg. And I think that was like his best, what he was like ahead. Yeah, so much in that regionals that it was like you couldn't even listen to him when he got injured.
How could you not be mad at that?
You know? Another one, there were so many Achilles injuries from the rebounding box jumps. So remember at the beginning of this how I talked about the Metcon we did and I voiced we do step downs because of this. There was a time when they would let you rebound and but people were experiencing that rebound, that Achilles tear, things with their Achilles.
Oh, wow.
And then 36 out of 320 men experienced pectoral tears in 3 consecutive weeks of regionals with no programming alterations.
Ouch.
Yeah. There was also that illness from E. coli bacteria in the lake that they were swimming in. And when I was reading this, I don't know, talking about the E. coli in the lake, like,
oh my gosh.
Even people around the lake knew about that. People who lived there, they would shut down the lake because it was not a lake for swimming.
Oh, no.
And yet they made the athletes do this.
Yeah, imagine your mouth is open in there and stuff.
Yeah,
Like,
and even Coulter, the underdogs, was like, are you guys serious? Like, come on. Like,
oh, gosh.
They have to be tested like these tests, and yet you're making them be in this lake that's
contaminated, apparently.
Yes. So then what kind of test is it? It's like, oh, if you don't get E. coli, you're good. If you don't, that's on you because you wanted to be a part of this? No, that's not a test in any way. Like, again, you guys voiced in the 2024 games that this is people's money. This is their livelihood. This is what they do. But yet in these past events, oh, you got E. coli, that sucks for you. When there has been knowledge that this lake at times was unswimmable. Not before the athletes were there, like very well known in that city. Like,
That's
oh yeah,
so
it got
sad.
closed down again because it was unswimmable. There was E. coli in it. Like,
Gosh.
and yet we chose
To send them there.
Yeah, and it's like, and you should be testing the water. And I'm pretty sure they did and found that. So was it tested before or after? And if it was tested before and somebody was like, yeah, it was, like, oh, well. Because I know it's tested after when people were getting sick and they're like, oh, yeah, it does have it. Oh, that
That's
sucks
so
for your
bad.
week. Yeah.
So
but
bad.
September 2023, Fort Worth, Texas is announced as the location for the 2024 CrossFit Games. On a non-CrossFit incorporated podcast, Dave Castro states that 95% of the events will be indoors. So that being said, because a lot of them, when they were in, they were in Madison, and even when they were in California, the majority of them were outside.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping back on that E. coli thing, Brent also said it's a pattern of behavior. It's their repeated attitude to our concerns. We try to provide feedback. They don't listen. To provide clear, unambiguous evidence of this, let me set out in detail how we as the PFAA tried to get more clarity in the heat in Texas for this year's games.
I love it. I love how Brett just sets it up like, oh yeah, let me set the record straight and tell you all the times we'd reached out to CrossFit HQ.
You know what's like really funny is like when they go over some of these athletes and they just talk about, oh, he's the professor and things like that.
Yeah.
Never once have I heard that he was so involved in the PFAA.
I love it.
Yeah. So like again, like why wouldn't you put that like, hey, he's also part of this and it helps the athletes and stuff like that? Like why wouldn't you want that background? But yeah, what were some of the things that they brought up? Because since they moved to Texas.
Yeah, so in September 2023, Fort Worth, Texas was announced as the location of the 2024 games. And on a non-CrossFit Inc. podcast, Dave Castro announced that 95% of the events will be done indoors.
And I think because people were voicing, like in Madison and in California, how a lot of them were done outside and it's done during like the midsummer. So the heat stroke was happening. Even spectators were talking about it where they couldn't even like watch athletes because it was so hot outside.
That's horrible.
Kind of the athletes, but a lot of the spectators were voicing like, this is hard. And I feel like the coaches were too, to have your athlete out here in this heat. And maybe that's, why they're like, oh, we'll go to Texas. When they put out there what their choices were, I thought, I 100% was like, there's no way they're going to do it in Texas. And I don't know who was around me. And they're like, why do you think that? I'm like, well, I mean, it was at the time, like, it was done in July. And I'm like, even August and September, like, y'all, for Arizona, July, August, and even the beginning of September is the hottest. Especially in August. July is like, I shouldn't even say that. July and August are the worst. And we're right next door, pretty close to Texas. And I know like Texas gets humid and hot. And I was like, there's no possible way if they keep getting, you know, called out about this heat stuff. Because it was like when they were talking about Madison, like they were being called out for that because when they did, I think the first time there or whatnot, it was like the hottest that had ever been in Madison.
I know. I was like, how horrible.
Yeah. And I'm like, is that Mother Nature just giving you a sign? Like California too. You go to California and especially in those areas that they're at, July and August is the hottest.
Yep.
Like you think California is nice and cool. You think like the LA area in July and August is nice and cool. No. Like the only cool part that you're going to see is very, very Northern California or San Diego by a beach and it's still stinking hot.
Oh yeah.
So that was my thing. And then when they announced Texas, I was like, no way. Like they're
trying to save money.
Yeah. So sorry to go.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine.
So what they say about
and
that.
And then Brent Fikowski continues saying that in December of that same year, the PFAA emailed CrossFit saying athletes will have to decide, whether or not to pay a large amount of money to prepare by training in the heat to create the necessary physiological adaptation for this year's games. We are unclear if this is necessary given some things we've heard regarding most of the tests being performed in an air-conditioned arena. However, the risk of being unprepared for the heat and performing outdoors is frightening. Ideally, we would like a commitment on the number of events to be held outdoors, their duration, and the time of day that they are to be performed. And this was CrossFit's answer, according to Brent Fikowski. We are not releasing event details at this time, but we assure you that the athlete's safety is our number one priority when considering the climate in Fort Worth.
What?
Didn't answer my question.
They're not even asking what the movements are. They're asking the time of day you're expecting to hold this event, the duration. What else were they asking? The time.
If it's going to be outdoors.
Yep.
Or the number of events that are going to be held outdoors.
Like you can't even say 5 of them are. One of them's going to be 5 minutes. Now, I know as an athlete, especially elite athlete, CrossFit could be like, oh, well, if I say 5 minutes, I know it's going to be a lift. that is not what they were asking, though. And I think with a nonprofit or where these people are coming from, it's not to be like, oh, well, it's going to be 5 minutes. So let's just tell everybody, well, we know at this day it's going to be a heavy lift or finding your 1 rep max. You do not know that, you know, and you could just say, hey, it's going to be between 2 and 5 minutes.
Right.
You know, and it's going to be this time. You can say, we can't give you exact times, we can give you roundabout times. You could at least done that, but you could for sure be like, it's gonna be this event is gonna be from 9 to 10 in the morning,
or no acknowledgement even of just like what they're
again, oh, don't worry, we got this. It's like, I'm not asking for anything to be ahead. I'm not asking much. I'm asking for what time of day in Texas during the summertime is this event going to be held? You know, not even what are the athletes' accommodations? Because I love how they put in the arena, air conditioned arena. Our gym has some air. Even in our air area, there's big fans. Because even with that air going, it gets very hot. And when you have tons of people in there during the workout, you are still sweating. It is not cool in there. So when they say these air conditioned arenas, during the workout, you're not going to feel cool or anything. You're going to feel really, really warm. It's more of the spectators feeling nice and cool.
True.
Which I am glad for that, because again, like I said, there were people who were like, it was too hot to watch. Like, I don't even know how they were out there, and how they say like that's turf crazy. Is hotter also. When you're down there, like all of that heat is going towards you.
Yeah, I think it just goes back to the theme that Brett was saying. It's like they're focused more on the test, quote unquote, instead of the safety. Like the factor of like, oh, let's keep it a mystery. You guys can't know the events or the times or the. It's like, why is there so much focus on that instead of the safety part?
So did the PFAA, after like CrossFit voiced their opinion, did they?
Well, it looks like back? Not until March and April of this year did they send another document to CrossFit. In it, they send a 2-page document reiterating their concerns of December from the 2023 games in more detail. And they provided simple language that they could use to give athletes enough detail to know how to acclimatize safely without divulging any secrets of the workout. So again, the PFAA making every single effort to accommodate CrossFit HQ and their needs and their specifications. And CrossFit HQ answered with a smaller percentage of events than Madison will occur outdoors. Again, not really,
you can't
not
even
much.
Say 3. We don't even know what you're doing outdoors.
Yep, not helpful.
Yeah,
not helpful.
So let me think, like if I'm HQ and it's like, okay, well, if we say 3 events, they'll be like, well, is there water? Well, is there this? I know that they're gonna have questions coming back, but can we just start a conversation?
Exactly.
Can we try and work together and be like, hey, remember, guys, we like this kind of mystery of stuff. And, you know, PFAA could be like, we get that. Viewers love it. But can we also have a sit down and be like, hey, these past events, this is what has happened. So we're just trying to get ahead of that to where this isn't going to happen. Remember, we want safety. We want to be also like, I bet they want to be like,
process,
hey, CrossFit has been doing 75 years and they've had 0 incidences. Like, if we could work together, there's going to be minor incidences.
Right.
But not big ones. And it's like, could we have talked to them so we could have figured that out?
Yeah, and I think that's the theme that Brett's trying to say. Like, why did it have to take a death for us to finally get so much exposure on this? Like, and it's really sad. And I think, like, he wraps it up in his post saying, we, the PFAA, distribute our document and their responses via email, website, and Instagram. We then learned that CrossFit didn't like how we communicated their response. Dave Castro also immediately divulges more valuable information on YouTube about the number of offsite events. We've tried to communicate professionally, and this is what we're met with. To me, this is a typical indication of CrossFit's lack of professionalism and interest in collaborating on safety concerns. He goes on by saying, I kept thinking, is that the best you can do for the athletes? This is the absolute simplest request. We're not even asking you to keep us out of the heat. We're just asking, please tell us how often and for how long it will be in the heat. Let the athletes living in colder climates know how they need to prepare. Is the secrecy of your workouts more important than the increasing the ability of an athlete to prepare for the heat safety? Again, hello, right?
Yeah.
During this time, we saw Brent Fikowski mentioned that during this time he saw people online poking fun at the athletes' concerns about the heat like it's a joke. Do people forget about Kara performing Murph in 2014? Athletes need this information so they can prepare themselves to compete safely. In the coming weeks, a lot of work needs to be done, and I plan to play a leadership role via the PFAA to keep pushing for change in a sport I know can be so much better in every way, even if my love of competing has dimmed. Every year, my trust in the CrossFit Games staff's ability to run an effective competition erodes more and more. It's not a secret that many competing athletes resent the organization. Then every so often, when things seem to get too bad, we're asked to bury the hatchet and come back to the table to collaborate. With the death of Lazar, the trust is gone. We need to change, and I, with my colleagues at the PFAA, hope to lead the way on behalf of all of the athletes, past, present, and future, to prevent something like this from happening again in a sport we love. Lazar is dead. Nothing will bring him back. Whew.
I know
Heavy.
when he said that, it was just like reading his post. And I think that's when like we both had read it, and I think like I sent it to you, or we both sent it to each other.
I got it from Grace actually, and then I sent it to you.
Okay. And then I put it on my
story. So did I. Yeah.
So it was just like
it was so
that it was like, I think we should do an episode about this because neither one of us knew this.
I didn't. And I was like, what is the PFAA? I didn't even know they existed.
I just thought like CrossFit put the games together and they funded everything and they did everything, and we were just very well known for that.
But it was heartbreaking. And Brent Fikowski being Brent Fikowski, like, it probably took him a lot to write that out and say, like, I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I have to do this.
And there were several athletes who spoke out and said this wasn't right.
Support,
like Fikowski, who's also on the board, like seeing pictures of her and videos of her holding Lazar pictures at the games, being like, this is not being silenced. Like, something was done wrong. And he's, he shouldn't have lost his life to talk about it. And I feel like with some big events that happen, in our history, it always takes like somebody's life or a big incident where it's like, no, these things should have been talked about. Because how we were talking at the beginning before we even started this episode, when we test our mics, we talk about the episode, what we're going to talk about, what life and things like that. And it was, why didn't they expect the worst, hope for the best? Mm-hmm. And with Brent, with Pat, with Fee, with all of them, and I know a few of them were the athletes that also dropped or they did the minute, are also on this board. Not saying that none of the other athletes are worthy, but how they were voted in by their peers. It just shows like their voice that they want Lazar's voice to be heard because he was on it. And they want their voices to be heard, and all athletes that are coming in and saying that it's also for the teens. We want this whole community to grow. We want our teens also to be recognized and their safety, because they are children. So their safety needs to be number one. The adult athlete's safety needs to be number one. Masters,
adaptive,
all
everything.
of them their safety has to be number one in these things. And for you guys at HQ to be like, we know best. And I get the secrecy because viewers are like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And majority of us talk so much crap on Dave because, Dave Castro, because we're like, oh, he did that. Oh, he had prolonged. But we sit there and we want to know what's going to happen. We want to blame
someone too.
Before the games happen, I was like, I wonder what crazy element's going to be, like what new movement standard's going to be, because it is like, what's new? What are we testing these athletes for? And like a lot of them said, like,
but at what cost?
Yeah. It's when they say the test, they're not going to war. Mm-mm. They're not fighting for their lives.
Apparently,
to be
they
tested
are
that way. Yeah,
man.
So I'm glad that a lot of the athletes have, voiced their opinion on it and kind of spoke out.
Because it's not easy to speak out, man. It's not easy to be the one person on the whole field who makes the decision to be like, I'm going to stand here for a minute.
Yeah.
Like, it's not easy to be the one person who's fighting, all of that. It's not.
Yeah, and like going back into it, like it shouldn't have been put on the athletes what should be done. I know that it's their livelihood, and lots of them train for it the whole year, or if not all of them do that. And a lot of them have sponsorships, and that's how they make their means and stuff like that. But it should have been the grown-ups being like, yeah, we're canceling, or yeah, we're going on. It's not, up to you guys, because we're just going to let you guys do this and fight it out. Like even talking to Joyce about like the timeline of what happened and what they put these people through. Is I was seeing that at 10:30 a.m. So we're gonna go a little bit back, and my news this session is gonna be kind of bobbing and weaving through some things that I've been hearing or listening to. But this first one, regarding safety and mental health for these athletes, is this timeline that I was seeing for what happened for event 1. 7 a.m. Central Time is when event 1 started. All right. So 7:37 a.m. is when Dukic is seen for the last time above the water before disappearing into the lake. That time to 8 a.m. is when more and more athletes are crossing the finish line. And Dukic's girlfriend and brother, who had finished the event, are growing concerned. There was talks about him walking back and forth on the finish line, like searching for his brother. Then we're moving on to when word starts to spread that he's missing. 7:51, MCU managing editor Joe Jinton Pilawa, who is standing on the boat ramp at the finish line, alerts the MCU team via Slack message that Lazar is missing at the moment. At that point, however, people are still hoping that his clip timer just isn't working, which is also the case of for athlete Henrik Wapaline.
I was going to say Wallapai.
I know. 8 a.m. is when police arrive on site. So 7 a.m. is when it starts. 8 a.m. is when police arrive on site, and media and spectators are ordered to leave the area. Okay, so let's fast forward. So we are at 8 a.m. when police are on site. 10:30 is when his body is pulled from the Marine Creek Reservoir. Okay. Then you fast forward to 1:30, athletes receive an email from CrossFit letting them know that there will be 1:30 is when athletes receive an email from CrossFit letting them know that there will be an optional meeting at 4 p.m. So 10:30, his body is found.
3 hours later.
1:30 is when they are like, hey, we're going to have a meeting. Okay. 4 o'clock.
This is all new to me too, so I'm like fascinated.
Yep. 4 o'clock is when athletes and coaches arrive at Dickey's Arena, where Castro initiates the conversation. He quickly tells the group that he has spoken to both Luca and Anja, which is
his wife.
Lazar's girlfriend.
Oh.
And they both have effectively given their blessing or their permission to, so to speak. So
what does that even mean?
Yeah, so like when somebody says so to speak, like, yeah,
like
sort of.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah. For the CrossFit Games to continue.
I wonder why they chose that wording. Interesting.
So like me and Joyce were talking like 10:30 a.m. is when people probably got notified also. Then you skip up to 1:30 and it's like, okay, we're going to have a meeting. And I could only imagine what these athletes were thinking about. Like, what is this meeting about? And then you get to 4 a.m. and they're like, okay, we're talking about continuing. And we've talked to his brother and his girlfriend, and they're okay with it. Mm-hmm. Were there grief counselors at this meeting?
That's so funny because remember Dave Castro in the interview online was like, "Oh, they've given us their blessing."
Yes, their blessing. They're okay with it.
Interesting.
Like, there's two different wordings, and when you word things differently, you know, it's crazy. It's iffy. It's like, why would you say that?
Knowing that you're like representing and that your words, you need to be very careful with them now. You know,
but it's like, were there grief counselors at this, or was this just a meeting for them to be like, hey, we're seeing about going on with the games? Like, why? There are so many people there who were his friend, who have competed with him for years, and you can't even have human decency to be like, we are going to talk about the games, but first, does anybody need, you know, to meet with a grievance counselor? Is anybody not okay to talk about this right now? And we're going to give you guys time. You know, and I feel like maybe there was a timeline, and at times I kind of feel like they felt like, oh, if we talk to them in a big group, we can get this handled. And they were noticing that it wasn't being handled. So we got to break it into small groups, because a lot of them in that big group weren't really talking, you know? So it was just like that short time frame. And then they did go on to be like, hey, the options are carry on with the CrossFit Games on Friday, cancel the games entirely. This is the one that I wish he would have voiced a little bit more, because he just said, we talked about doing them, we talked about canceling them, and then we talked about doing it as an exhibition. What that meant is if they did it as an exhibition, there's no leaderboard, and they would split the prize money evenly and donate some to the family. He didn't even voice that. He just said an expedition. When I think of that, I did cheer, and we did expedition comps where we were trying our new routine out. So we didn't want to go through the competition. We'd be towards the end, and we wanted to try things out to not be graded. We did get like feedback, but it wasn't, you lost, you know, your last because you did this. It was, what can we do better? And this competition, we're using that. So when I heard that, I was like, oh, I can see why they didn't want to do it, because it wasn't even noted that, yes, the prize money would be evenly distributed and we are donating to the family. Is it also like, they were like, oh, Fit Aid got it covered. This company's got it covered. We don't need to voice it over and over again, but you do. You know, you really do.
Oh,
and I know they were saying like nothing was getting solved, so they broke it up, and nothing was getting solved in the small groups. So then they did their whole grouping, and they did the women, the men, the teams, the coaches. They had 5 from each group. Then they sent the surveys out at 7:00, and they were told that they must reply by 8:30. Again, when you're going through grief and you're giving people timelines that they have to hit, you are telling them that they're not valid, that you have a time frame to close your emotions. When I read that, if somebody was like, hey, that just happened, but I need you to respond within an hour, I can't promise it, but I have to do it, or otherwise it's not okay. You know, and then once everything was said and done, at 8:30, the survey results were in. And by 9:09 p.m., the CrossFit Games send out an email to the athletes saying that the 2024 CrossFit Games will continue tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So,
wow, you had no time to prepare for the next one.
Yeah. So it is already 10 a.m. People are not sleeping. People are not eating. People have been worrying about timelines. People have been worried about if I say the wrong thing in this group. So many things. And in a compacted time frame for these people going through this, whether they were close friends with him or not.
No.
To wrap their brain around it and go out there and compete.
I wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah. So, that was very shocking to me when it was broken down that way. Mm-hmm. It was shocking to me that they did it regardless, but like, I remember everybody at the gym, because our owners were gone. They were actually at the games. Like, they'd be like, so do you think they would cancel? I was like, coming from a big business standpoint, there's no way. Yeah. That I
they didn't want to lose out on all that money.
I was like, they're probably going to push it back, because there's also no way, because a couple of them were like, well, would they reschedule it? I go, okay, if we cancel it, they lose out on money. If they reschedule it, they're losing out on money, because now they need a new venue. Because this venue was booked for them during this time. They need a new couple weeks. Is that going to give the athletes enough to do that? All the people who paid to go there, are they refunding their money for their tickets? Probably not. The people who flied there, the food, the athletes' food, the athletes' stuff. Like, no way. They're not going to reschedule it either, because they also have teens and masters and adaptive to go through. They're gonna carry on. I was like, I bet you they push these athletes to do it. And it was just,
again, like Brent said, it's all about the money sometimes.
It is. And that was the other thing. So
sad.
I saw that timeline, and then my brain went to the grief counselors, and my brain went to money. And then I remembered Kettlebell and Cocktails, which is another CrossFit podcast. And I highly recommend, like, go out, touch your toe in a couple of these podcasts. This episode, which was done in February, okay, mind you, so it was 6 months ago before this incident, it was an interview with CEO Don Fowle. And that's when he was going over, like, what his take on CrossFit and what he's bringing to the table. And this also, I didn't even know, because they kept talking about Berkshire through a lot of these things, with things that were happening recently. And that's a private financial management company that CrossFit is tied with. You know, naive. This girl was naive so much. I was just like, CrossFit just does CrossFit for themselves and gets money from this. You know, I forget about investors and investments. And I know, and I know that affiliates are investors, because they're giving money to invest in this name and this company. But he, you know, his accountability, he said, was number one, the community and existing and future members of our community. Number two is his HQ team, right? He wants them to feel that HQ is something to be proud of, and in their mind and soul. So are you going to be proud that you're telling these athletes that you know better than them? You know, and then the third is, of course, the business owners and the investors and everything like that. He does claim that he wants to be a part in the long run. But you know how investors are. Like, they have timelines too, 5 to 7 years. And we're in a 4-year partnership right now with Berkshire. So I don't know what their timeline of when they want to sell or their equity in CrossFit. But that's why he was saying, and I know this was clickbait for a lot of things, because I was like, oh, I want to listen to it, because he says that he made cuts. You know, they made cuts. They did cut jobs. They, it was either cut costs to build earnings, or you increase numbers to grow. You know, cutting costs is like the easier thing. So moving the games to Texas, pulling coverage to make coverage better by doing, you know, doing the teens, doing the adaptive, doing the masters.
Right.
I'm sorry to say, but coverage sucked for me, because it was, a lot of people didn't know about the clean ladder. A lot of people had to pay for the last one. And it was like,
it was a hot mess.
Because I couldn't go to the games, I couldn't spectate at the games, and they paid their ticket. I have to pay mine.
$10.
I know, and a lot of you guys might be like,
crazy.
$10 not that much, but
for the last event, which was like less than
time,
yeah,
and the clean one, if you had to pay $10 for that too, like,
it's mean.
Yeah, it just and he talks about that he wants to be transparent and open communication, and I feel like there hasn't been a lot then. Is it transparency and communication with the investors more than it is with the community and the athletes that are supporting your community and growing your community?
Apparently.
You know, like when I was listening to it, I was like, it's hard. There is no right answer. There is always the wrong answer. People are always going to count your flaws, and we do want to grow this community, and they do want to grow the company to be profitable, because breaking even is not profitable, and I get that, to a standard. And I know his message, which was brought out a couple days after, was being, you know, putting the fault on them, saying they shouldn't put it on the athletes, and they want to be transparent, and they want to do all these things. And I know you have a PR team.
Oh, yeah.
And you have a legal team and things like that, because number one thing, when I learned in the medical field, or even when I was coaching and doing gymnastics, like, you never ever are supposed to say, I did something wrong, because then that person can take it back and be like, oh, they did claim they did something wrong, so they are at fault. And that's the sad thing with, like, society. You say you did something wrong, people will shove it in your face and take you for everything you're worth.
Man.
But if the family said that it was okay to do it, and you asked them at their lowest point, because when did you ask them that? Because you told
Right
people
after.
at 1:30 that there's going to be a meetup. So what was that conversation like, to be like, hey, I know you just lost somebody, and Lord help me if they said, you know, he would want us to do this. You don't know what Lazar would want. I don't know. Your closest friends, like if Joycey, I know what Joycey would want right now, but if she's at her lowest point, I don't know if that would be the same.
Want some chili cheese Frito-Lays?
I have those if you want them.
Oh, I might take a bag.
Yeah. So I actually know what she wants, but I don't know what she wants.
She has what I want.
You don't know what somebody wants when they're grasping.
Yeah, and that's a bad card to play too.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't think that must have been the case, because his brother wasn't very happy about it.
I know. I think it was just like...
So when they say they got the blessing, I'm like, did you really though? Because the brother was not happy at all.
I feel like when something tragic happens, or a big event happens, or anything like that, like,
it's just a lot
when
to
you're
ask
in
of
the
a person.
moment, you're just trying to survive, and you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then when you sit down and you go through your grief, or you go through the steps of what just happened, you start to realize, no, that's not okay. It's not okay.
So then what happens when you're not given that time?
Yeah, so there's so many questions. So again, that one was
I know,
Kettlebells and Cocktails.
I was going to ask you, and have we heard anything from CrossFit HQ since the
The
Brent post, or since anything?
I haven't. I don't know if you
haven't
could look
either.
that up. So that was with Kettlebells and Cocktails. So if you want to go listen to that episode, or any of their episodes, they're very informative. The other one that I was listening to was the Elite Fitness, and that's with Tommy Marquez, Sean Woodland, and with Lauren Khalil. They were actually talking to Joshua Hicks, who's on the board for PFAA. And with Joshua Hicks, he was part of the medical team from 2015 to 2022. He actually was the main person. In the 2022, he did a lot for Wadapalooza, and they were asking him about this. The only thing about this episode is Joshua Hicks is in an airport, so you can hear a lot of the airport things going on, and his connection goes in and out. But it was very eye-opening to listen to when they did talk about, like, water things, and he was going over how they do meet with wherever they're holding those events, they meet with, you know, the heads of the safety and things in those areas, and then in those communities, and he tries to reiterate and voice things whether they want to hear it or not, and try to meet with these people. Because what they were saying is, I know, like, me and a couple of the members at our gym were like, I've seen tons of people on kayaks. I've seen tons of people on paddle boards. We've seen boats at events. We've seen the big, huge buoys. Were things done differently for this? And he could only give his insight of the things that he was at. And he was like, hey, at the Wadapalooza one, that is like a state park. So we have more people who could be there. The fire department's there. Paramedics are on site. The Coast Guard's there. So it's like, okay, so if you're able to do that in that area, so when CrossFit goes to the games and does other things, are they able to do the same thing? I believe they can. But it's where they're choosing to host these places. You know, and then they were talking about like training. People get trained, and they were talking about numbers. So they have their responders for when there's a water. And he was like, water's a little bit harder. When you do running, there's a stagnant thing that they are on, and they're the only ones moving. The water is continuously moving, and so is the athlete. But when he was talking about numbers with it, it's a responder and a lifeguard. It is a responder and a lifeguard to every 5 athletes.
That's insane.
And what is in their line of sight. All right. And they voice about like how close they are to them and everything. But to me, that 2 people to every 5 athletes, was that done for this prior game or this past game? I don't know. I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know if anybody does know those right now other than HQ and a couple other people close to that vest. Then he was talking about, you know, the Coast Guard then also brings like those floating bags, and they have their boats and stuff like that. The other thing is there's paddle boarders and then there's kayaks. And then he says the kayaks are a lot more stable than the paddle boards. So then that athlete can hold on and can get their grouping.
Catch their breath. Yeah.
And you see also like those signs to go in and help that. And I remember one of the Wadapalooza ones, like there was a lot of kayaks and paddleboarders who were going to athletes because they could see what was going on and they were holding on. Or those big buoys, those athletes were holding on because the commentators were also commenting about it. You know? So seeing those numbers and seeing that I wasn't able to watch even the beginning of event 1, so you couldn't see. I just know what was speculated and hearing about even like people were yelling and pointing. But when you have like a big, huge event, people are yelling and encouraging and doing that. But even when a bystander like jumps in and, you know, it's, I can also see like, hey, that bystander took another, you know, lifeguard or person out of what they should be watching because now they don't know if that spectator fell in or there's so many different sides to this. But it's also like the chip or the thing that they had on their leg to do their heart rate to see where they were at, where they're moving. And a couple of these things like we voiced before when PFAA had talked about it, there's some that aren't meant to be in the water. They were saying that the athletes weren't moving for like 5 minutes when they were done. Like it literally says that they're not supposed to be in the water for a certain amount of time. And were those things being used? And are these the cutbacks that we are also putting in place to increase revenue?
That's the scary question.
Because that was the other thing. I was like, oh, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together when they were saying, oh, they moved the games and that's why they bracketed out teens, masters, and adaptive. And I was like, I thought that would lose money. But if you have people buying tickets to these events and doing all these things and we're cutting back on things that we normally do for these events, this is how we're making money with it.
It makes sense.
You know, and they did say that it was supposed to be, you know, increasing coverage. And I was like, well, the coverage for the actual games didn't do well. And I'm not saying because they cut event 1, that should have been cut. I believe that we see so much on social media that the family doesn't need to also be able to look things up, I feel. So I was just going over all of these and I was like, okay, I want to read this thing. I want to listen to this. So again, that was the Elite Fitness podcast. If you want to go and listen to that. We also have the KettleBells and Cocktails.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. Again, they interviewed Don Fowle 6 months
prior to the games.
Yep. And that's in February because they were talking about the Open. And they also interviewed him right when he was announced as the CEO.
I know. I'm so curious to see what's going to happen after the games because they've been really hush-hush ever since
They have. And usually when a big incident happens, they usually fire people.
So I've had a feeling Dave Castro was going to get the boot.
I think they should look at everything, reevaluate, do their investigation, but sit down with PFAA with every event that they have.
I'm with you.
Because if Joshua Hicks is on there and Wadapalooza has had, there's other safety issues that we're just not going to get. Like, sometimes people with their metabolic system is not okay. The heat exhaustion, you can learn from that. You can learn not to do, 2-hour things outside when it's has the heat. There are things that you have to learn from. It shouldn't have been somebody's death. And when athletes are politely asking you, then demanding that you listen to them, and then straight out yelling at you, these are issues. It's time to sit down and listen to them. Mm-hmm. And if that's what CrossFit needs to do, that's what CrossFit needs to do. We are all growing in things, and the best thing that you could do is listen to these athletes.
100%. It's time.
Yeah. So I know, you guys, this was a very long episode. It was more informative about things, but we wanted to get more informed about it. We thought that we would reach or let you guys know about it.
I do like me some tea. I do like me some tea.
And I like learning about stuff.
Yeah, I didn't even, again, I didn't know
hobby that I have, so.
I do like research, and I didn't even know they existed, so.
Nope.
There's that.
Yep.
But I think, just to kind of reiterate everything, like, thank you for, again, always allowing us this amazing platform to speak to you guys about CrossFit topics. In this case, the PFAA, or the Professional Fitness Athletes Association, its goals, its athletes, and also the community it serves. We're really happy to just give them more exposure, give them more attention and more of your time, because truthfully, it seems like this organization needs more of that exposure and needs more support. So please feel free to go to their website if you want to find out some more. Their website is professionalfitnessathleteassociation.org. They also do have a link if you want to donate to the Lazar Dukic GoFundMe page, so you can access that directly from their site as well.
And I'll put that in the show notes along with, and I know that we just put a sad topic, but with a happy topic with our merch drop. We have one more week. Our merch drop stops on the 26th of August. Yay. So get your shirts.
And I'm so excited. I'm ready to crop mine.
Yep. But a big thank you to my co-host. This episode was written and edited by us. And a big shout out to you guys for listening, guys. Thank you so much. Without you guys, we couldn't be doing this.
I know. And for all of y'all who bought t-shirts, thank y'all. I can't wait to rep them at the gym with y'all.
I know. We need to do a big, huge picture and then say, if you're not in town, we want to see your
I know.
Stuff.
I'm like,
but music is from SoundCloud, and Uppbeatz. Our references are from Professional Fitness Athlete Association.org, Morning Chalk Up, Barbin.com. Also from the podcast are from KettleBells and Cocktails and Elite Fitness Podcast.
I like that name. It makes me want a cocktail.
It's really cute. Remember when we were going over what our podcast names were going to be, and then we read some, so we weren't going to take any of them, and we're like, oh man, that's the cutest.
Yeah, they have a cool name.
Yeah.
Even though alcohol isn't great for you. But
yeah. But really, listen to those episodes, or even listen to theirs. Give them a shout out where you heard to listen at theirs. And if you feel like this podcast is your swig of pre-workout, please subscribe, follow, and leave a review. Remember, don't be a Karen, be a Sharon.
See, now we need a slogan. Sticker shirt with that.
Yeah. Now we need a slogan. I was like, I just created one.
No, I know that is our slogan, but we need some merch with the slogan.
We do.
I feel like that would even sell with non-CrossFitters.
Yeah. Don't be a Karen. Be a Sharon.
I like it. I like it.
And until...
Trademark pending. We meet
TM.
Oh, man. Well, you know your trademarks. Okay, girl.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, all right. She knows. Sorry, I totally butchered that.
Yeah. But until
we meet at the whiteboard again.
Bye.
Later.
TM.